What do you call it when black rioters destroy a black man's liquor store business? It's not black versus white, it's civilized versus uncivilized. Furthermore, what do we call it when Officer Caesar Goodson, the man who was driving the vehicle that Freddie Gray was in when he was injured, what do we call it when Caesar Goodson is black himself? The man driving the car, the man stomping on the brake. What do we call it when a black man is supposedly the racist who killed Freddie Gray? Or what do we call it when black clergymen had to go out into the middle of the streets during the Baltimore riots and looting and defend businesses and their community from being destroyed and looted by absolute savages? Do you call that racism? That's called the civilized versus the uncivilized. And it transcends race. It transcends skin color. The war is not black versus white. It's civilized versus uncivilized. The animal savages versus those who believe in long-term stability rather than short-term self-destruction and implosion. If Black Lives Matter so much, why aren't there nationwide protests for black-on-black crimes? Why is it that the greatest, most intense protests/rioting occur when a white man supposedly kills a black man, but not when a black man kills a black man? It seems to be a subtle form of racism. In past cases, whether it's the Mike Brown or the Trayvon Martin, I've been highly skeptical of the circumstances surrounding the case. I mean, just take Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown. Highly contested cases with opposing sides, evidence to and against, for and against, both conflicting sides of the story. Not a very clear-cut case. It's not like they have footage of Mike Brown stepping out of class, after he got straight A's, walking home with his diploma to show it to his mom, and a white cop just comes out of nowhere and shoots him dead. There are probably very clear-cut cases of racist cops shooting dead black people that are way better examples of the evil white supremacy than these frivolous, ambiguous, uncertain cases. What I find annoying about some elements of the hashtag Black Lives Matter people is that they seem to become really obsessed with the death of black people only when it was at the hands of a white person. And it's like the whole point of Black Lives Matter is that Black Lives Matter. And yet, what about black-on-black crime? What about so many blacks who are being killed by each other in inner-city violence? Let's see, we got a black president. Baltimore has a black mayor, mostly black police force, black state attorney. Even if these cops killed him, how much longer are you going to use the race card? How much longer are you going to use? That's my problem. My problem is the erroneous complaining that racism causes all your trouble. Let's talk about rioting. Tearing down your own community as a way to improve your community. Tearing down local businesses. A black liquor store owner had his liquor store totally looted and destroyed by mostly dark-skinned rioters and protesters. It's all caught in footage. And for those who mention, oh, but what about the way the media reports white sports fans rioting after their team loses a game, and then the way that the media reports black looting and rioting over the death of a black man? Well, they're completely different. These are completely different situations, and I'll explain it to you by reading a comment that I posted under a video. I wrote, "There's a huge difference between drunken morons rioting because of their team loss and the politically driven riots in Baltimore. When blacks start stampeding through the streets trying to tear down their local civilization, they claim to have political/social motivations to transform society. Are they both destructive, moronic riots? Yes, but one isn't attempting to reform society while simultaneously burning it to the ground. The former riots is just drunken idiots who are bored with their easy lives. The latter are supposed fighters for justice with a political social undertone trying to transform society. That key difference explains the different approach to reporting them between sports riots and Black Lives Matter riots. So it really makes me wonder, what element of destruction do we see in these riots that just follows them in everyday life? And does that lead to crime? Does that element of let's tear down our community in an effort to make it better, does that follow that barbarism, that destructive element? What is that? And is it responsible for higher crime rates among them? Is it responsible for so-called racial profiling? People say that's racist. But it's not racism. It's really just common sense. And it's not something that you have to do strictly to blacks. Like if you're walking down the park in the middle of the night and an old woman walks past you, a 90-year-old woman walks past you, you're not going to be too worried. But if you're walking down the park and a middle-aged white man walks past you, you're going to be more concerned than if an old 90-year-old lady walked by you. You're probably going to be more likely to turn around and make sure that the middle-aged white man may not mug you or hurt you. Profiling. Common sense is just something you do. Now, the only counter argument that I can consider is that, and this is something that I've said before, is that who do you blame? What is the source of the problem here? We did have slavery in this country. We did have institutionalized racism in this country. And racism undeniably still exists. It has to. I doubt it doesn't exist anymore. There are admitted KKK members out there. So I would say that it's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg? At one time you want to say to the black community, become independent, become empowered, get on your own 2 feet, no longer have to rely on Whitey's welfare money to get through the day. If you really want to know what empowerment is, if you really want to be independent, if you really want to become empowered enough to help yourself, your black family, and your black community and raise the black society, you want to become as independent, as empowered as you can, not dependent on Whitey's welfare money. Okay? Again, who could be more racist than the Democrats and the Liberal Party? Because sure, they might give you some welfare checks and they might be, the party that's for the blacks, but there's an inherent condescension to them. And hey, isn't it Democrats mostly who call for gun control? What more racist policy could there be than gun control? Okay? If the cops are supposedly a bunch of evil white racists who want to kill blacks, yet Democrats want to take guns away from the general population, including blacks, that means disarmed blacks' primary form of self-defense is calling 911. They got to call up the racist white cops because a black man cannot defend himself against anybody else using his own gun, because the liberal Democrats who care about blacks fucking are trying to ban guns, so that the only way you can defend yourself in a crazy situation is to call the supposed racist white cops to save you. You want to talk about the racist, man? The liberal parties is probably worse, because at least when we're talking about like the general like Republicans or the right or the conservatives, which by the way, I'm not a Republican or a conservative. I'm not a Democrat either. At least with the Republicans, you pretty much assume that they're a bunch of racist fucks. I'm not saying they are, but if you're these Black Lives Matter people, you just assume that, you're Republican, you're probably a racist. Whereas the Democrats, the liberals, they come off nice. They're the iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. And you think they're nice and they're not going to hurt you. Well, I wouldn't be too sure about that. So, look, if psychotic douchebag cops did in fact unjustly kill Freddie Gray, then congratulations. Put their asses in prison. That is barbarism, what they did. My concern now, though, is, well, what if the only reason or a big motivating factor for why Marilyn Mosby, the state attorney for Baltimore, what if the main reason she came out, what if the main reason they concluded that the cops were guilty is because they were so afraid of rioting? What if the cops were in fact not guilty, but the fear of more rioting and madness from these primitive savages, really, that's all they are. It's not racist, it's fact. You know, you can be a white primitive savage, okay? You can be a black primitive savage. It's not, the truth is not racist. The truth is not racist. It's an observation. What if they concluded out of pressure that the cops were guilty and they were in fact not? Now, these are just charges put forward in the span of 24 hours, or 48 hours, I think. How much investigating, thorough investigating, can you do in 48 hours? Man, maybe they can come to a rational conclusion, or maybe they just wanted to squelch civil unrest by saying that the cops did it. Will the cops actually be convicted in court at a later date? That's the question. So those are my thoughts to sum it up briefly. You know, it doesn't make sense tearing down your own community, looting, stealing toilet paper and bags of Doritos. That doesn't sound like political activism. That sounds like stupidity. And, you know, I think it's kind of sad that the more civilized aspects of the black community, people who are logical and rational, who don't support that kind of stuff, are still sympathetic to that kind of looting, stealing things. Okay? And when you see the stealing and the looting happening, I mean, what does that tell you about the mind state of some of these individuals? It makes you wonder why there are higher crime rates there. It makes you wonder why racial profiling happens. You see? So it's like cause and effect, chicken or the egg thing. All right? Is a history of American slavery of blacks and institutionalized racism, are the effects of that so deep that they're still clinging on today, still kind of going through waves today? So when you see a desperate black man struggling to survive and resorting to desperation and crazy behavior, is he a victim of America's slavery racist past? Or is he just using the history of American racism and slavery to justify not improving his life? And that's kind of the tough question, the chicken or the egg question, when it comes to race relations in America, is at what point do we say, okay, the past is the past, time to move on? That's my main concern. My main concern is that people are just going to continuously, perpetually use the past as a way to justify unhealthy behavior today. How long can you perpetuate that for? And I think it comes to a point where you have to stop being a victim. And don't do it for me. Don't do it, you know, for the dominant society. Do it for yourself. For your children. You can't have children if your mentality is, I'm going to go out there and loot shit. That's not a stable mentality. You can't have long-term sustenance, long-term civilized sustenance that's required to raise a family. Maybe you don't want to have kids. That's a possibility too. 70-some+% of African American children are born out of wedlock. So it's a complex issue. Definitely a lot of generalizations going around, but that's kind of my stance on it right now.